In this edition of The Exchange, we speak to founder David Phelps about his platform Confetti, the difference between opinion and prediction markets, and what he believes the ethical implications of both will be as the technology continues to grow and expand. The first question that I have for you is obviously always just tell me a little bit about David, right? You as a person, and then how David the founder was born, because I think that that's really important to understanding like your motive and incentive for wanting to create a company, you know?
Yeah. I never really intended to be a founder, and now I've done it 3 times. And I do think it's important that there's a lot of people who they just want to be successful and they want to be important, and then they try to go out to, find the idea that will execute, and occasionally that works. People have enough drive that they can do that and just get excited about any problem. But for the most part, you want. You should really only become a founder if you're actually motivated by the problem that you're trying to solve,
right?
Or you're actually motivated by the product that you want to build. And in my case, I was working as a tutor for many years, and just saw from the inside just how broken the tutoring industry was. And I thought there's got to be a better model. I would not, I was an independent tutor, and I thought I would never work for any of these agencies that are out there because they're taking 2/3 of what they charge. Any good tutor's not going to work for them. There's got to be a better model that can actually get good tutors. And from that, I, with my co-founder, who is also, a tutor who's experiencing these issues, we went and we built a tutoring agency. And, this is in the early days of Stripe Connect, where we were able to automate a lot of business using technology that just was not possible to automate before then. Before then, you would have had to have offices and secretaries and invoices and, checks and, with Stripe Connect, you could just automate all of this, which meant lowering your costs so that you could pay people better and you could build a better model. So, we got really lucky. We built this, kind of phenomenally wonderful business together, and that's how I became a founder. And then, from there, just seeing the ways that, tech could actually, provide disintermediation and allow people to get paid better kind of just became, an impetus in thinking about what the future could look like, and that then led me to crypto and, to journey there as well. Well, every time I built something, it's been because it's been something I've wanted to see in the world. And not because I think particularly obsessed with the idea of myself as a founder. So, that's my own journey. It's different for different people, obviously.
And when you were tutoring, what subjects were you tutoring and for what grades? Was there any correlation between technology or math or, or was it, or even linguistics? What was your kind of, forte with that?
No, I don't think there's any correlation. I didn't know anything about tech. And I had no interest in tech. I had friends who were working in it, and I only became interested in it because it was a useful thing to learn to solve the problem that I wanted to solve, which is how to pay people better. And that's what motivated my interest in technology. But no, I tutored everything. I think, in my own case, I'm very ADHD, and that's a blessing and a curse, but it means that I have really broad interest in a lot of different things. So I'm very surface level in a wide variety of subjects and interests in my life. I'm not that deep on anything, and I think that's been helpful because as a co-founder, you want one person who's like that, and then you want one person who's just really deep on a few things.
Right.
And that tends to be a good balance for co-founders.
For sure. Oh, again, the wanting to pay people better. Let's switch that over to prediction markets, right? So as a product and a concept, what was appealing to you about the idea of a prediction market? Or did Confetti start off initially as a prediction market? Did, it morph?
We're not a prediction market.
Okay.
And we're definitely adjacent in some ways, but I would call ourselves in the technical category is opinion market.
Okay.
So in a prediction market, you are thinking about objective outcomes, right? Like who's going to win the game, right?
Yeah.
In an opinion market, you're thinking about subjective outcomes, like who is the best player in the game,
right?
What was the best shot in the game, right? These kinds of things. And so, there's a few differences here. One is there's no insider trading. One is it doesn't affect real world outcomes. So, these things I think are important. I really see Confetti as a game. Like, the way that I understand Confetti and the way I think about it is this is a game that you're playing. And this is a game you're playing that is incentivizing people to pay attention. So, like, what I would love to see and what I'm trying to work on now is getting, like, a reality TV show where you imagine a reality TV show where every week people tune in and they vote on who gets eliminated. So there's a singing competition, they vote on what singer gets eliminated. There's a dating show, they vote on who gets eliminated in dating. And, through this, the financial incentive, right, which is they can make money from this if they vote on the winner, or in this case, the loser, they vote on the number one entry they can earn. That is really just a means to an end. And, like, the end for me is the fun that they're having in playing this game and the attention that everyone is getting from it, right? That you have now increased the attention that people can get because there's this financial incentive at play that is just, helping increase enjoyment of the activity. And I think, like, a good example here is, something like poker, where it's like, there are people who play poker for money. But, like, for the most part, people play poker not because they're trying to earn a living off of it. They play poker because putting some money down makes it a more fun game to play. Right. And that's, like, that makes it more enjoyable if you can put $5 in, right, on a poker game. And it adds stakes to it in a way that just makes it more fun. And I think that's kind of, for me, like, what Confetti is, where it's like, it really, at the end of the day, it's polling, right? It's asking people their opinion on things, but in a way that makes it more fun because of the financial incentive that's involved. And that's personally just how I think about it.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's a really important distinction because, again, that conversation in itself allows for a nuance that hasn't been expressed by and large yet, right? I think that that's and I'm trying not to take up too much of your time or get too far off topic because that's really, really interesting, and I think that actually needs to be explored further. So, from an ethical standpoint, right? Like, oh, absolutely, and I think that that's a really important distinction because, again, that conversation in itself allows for a nuance that hasn't been expressed by and large yet, right? I think that that's and I'm trying not to take up too much of your time or get too far off topic because that's really, really interesting, and I think that actually needs to be explored further. So, from an ethical standpoint, right? Like, I think a lot of the conversations around ethics and around, the subjugation or manipulation of social engineering attached to a thing like, a poly market or to a cow sheet, right? Or the propensity that it could have to turn into that, right? Is the idea that opinions can somehow, even though they're supposed to be, more off the cuff type of intuitive types of bets, if you will, you know what I mean, that opinions can dominate that conversation, and somehow convoluted in some kind of way, so that, again, I guess that's where the social engineering gets introduced, right? Like, if you are intent on seeing a thing happen and it's your opinion that this thing can happen, I guess there's even an aspect of, like, social contagion from certain opinions that can come about, right? Where maybe the presence or influence of a person who holds an opinion can then in itself sway others' opinions, right? And therefore shape predictions or what people are saying is their prediction. So what I think is so interesting about Confetti is that it feels like a very sterile, very sanitized, safe space to really, like, operate within the purest form of that. And I'm curious for you, what do you see some of the bigger questions about that, like that lack of nuance as it's being presented to, because, like, we're coming from Web3, right? We're kind of crypto people. What do you, and we've had some of our understandings and our pure intentions changed once they got to the larger national narratives, right? And I think that you saying this says, like, it's showing me that already in this space, that's already happened, right? That there are potentially people that are trying to iterate on this or go about this in a different way, but the way it's being synthesized and generalized is just prediction. So what do you feel like, in terms of that conversation about social engineering, manipulation, and of the markets and its impact on current events? Should we be considering those ethics as we're building towards that? Should we be trying to control that narrative and get people to understand that there's a difference? Or, like, what do you think is going to be the outcome of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things to say here. And one is, you shouldn't dismiss the impact of financialization on, the real world, right? People who are spending, their entire paycheck on these products, obviously concerned, right? If they're just, totally guessing and, for one. I think also, we put a lot of time and effort into the mechanics of how Confetti works so that, we can avoid manipulation. But if we hadn't, you can imagine a really similar product to what I described that would be really easy to manipulate, where whales could just dump in $1 million, sway the outcome, take home money whenever they want. And obviously that just wouldn't be a fun game.
Right.
Like, all society, that's not a fun game. I think also, when you start connecting these kinds of like online games to real world outcomes, there is an added danger, right? Like if you imagine you use Confetti for a presidential election and everyone is voting on who should be president and they're putting up money and then earning from that, like that presents some very real issues. And that's very much what we're not trying to build, right? We're not trying to build something that is connected to actual real world outcomes at a political level. Because you do run into those issues. So, on the one hand, I think there is obviously so much skepticism around crypto products and around financialized products, and like it would be really silly to dismiss that. There are very good reasons to have this, and like it's something we're thinking about every day and trying to like really focus on this being a fun game that people play, right? And really leaning on that rather than an insider trading platform where if you know that we're going to bomb Iran, you're going to be able to make millions of dollars, and if you can sway the president to bomb Iran, then you'll make even more.
Right.
Like that's where we start to really run into ethical issues, and like that's again the difference between a prediction market and an opinion market. The other thing I would say though is I do think there is a knee-jerk reaction a lot of times from people around what feels dystopian versus what actually is dystopian.
True.
And it feels very dystopian to say, anyone can make money, can be a war profiteer now because they can make money off betting if, the U.S. is going to bomb Iran. And yeah, for sure, it feels dark, right, to be making like $100 off of, the outcome of like, people's lives. Will the genocide be committed and then you can earn $1,000? Like this sounds very, very dark.
Yeah.
But I do think, it's important. It's really important to recognize that your money is not actually affecting that outcome. Your money is not actually changing the outcome of people's lives. Whereas if you invest in the S&P 500 and you give, your $100 to the S&P 500, it's now going into war companies, right, that are directly killing people. So, like, our norm of what we think is perfectly ethically okay is to support real-world outcomes that are often really horrific. And then when we build derivatives products around them, everyone gets horrified because it kind of exposes the underlying game of what's going on.
For sure.
And so I also think there's a really overblown reaction to financialization because it actually reveals the underlying mechanisms that we often don't want to recognize about, the stock market and financialization generally. But derivatives products don't actually affect, the outcomes. And I think that's really, really important to identify. Like, as bad as it sounds to make $100 off of betting on genocide, it's a lot better than putting $100 towards committing genocide.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is not a conversation people really want to have right now.
Okay, no, so again, you bring up very prescient points. Let's talk about, though, the social infrastructure around that, right? Obviously, there's a lot of conversation right now around, even in the financial market, right? Verticals that were once seen illicit being the verticals that the fintech industry, by and large, and the banking industry and the rails need to start supporting, right? Firearms, pornography, gambling, iGaming, whatever the case might be. In the, case of derivative markets, specifically in like you said, the financialization of these new products. There's a twofold question here, and I think a twofold conversation. One is, what in your diagnosis, right, or in your purview, what is the I guess, like, social environment that we're living in, or the cultural environment we're living in, that are making people more willing to gamble, right? Like, what has changed in the conversation socially, culturally, amongst ourselves as citizens, that this is something that we're even willing to start paying attention to? Because you're right, in a lot of ways it does feel dark, it does feel dystopian. We definitely are at a chasm generationally now, right, between boomers, millennials, and the newbies. And, each of us has different ideals of what's appropriate, what we're comfortable with, what we're willing to do, what we do in the open versus what we do in private, So for you, what has changed, and what do you think it says about the state of America that this is even a vertical that can exist and is gaining traction right now?
I mean, It's not surprising because it's always existed. Like prediction markets, that term, it can apply to the stock market. Like the stock market is a prediction market. You're going and you're buying a stock because you're predicting that it's going to go up, in value. It's just expanding the scope of that, right? But even then, it's like, people have been betting on horses, people have been playing poker,
chickens, roosters, shells.
What is new is that America is a very puritanical country that has, on the one hand, been the financial leading capital of Wall Street, and told everyone to buy the S&P 500, and somehow pretended that this is not a form of gambling and that this is a reasonable middle class thing to do. But on the other hand, has banned casinos and has all these Puritan values against what it considers to be degeneracy. That really just extends back to, frankly, a Protestant tradition from Luther and Calvin. Europe, for example, has not been like this. Asia has not been like this. You walk around Berlin, there's casinos everywhere. It's totally normalized. So what's really new is American culture having to, I think, grapple with its legacy of, on the one hand, being the most financialized culture in the world, and on the other hand, being very openly anti-financial, financialization. And I think it's like, that's actually what we're witnessing now is this conversation coming to the fore about, like, America's own paradoxes as a culture. I think that's the change.
For sure. And I think also too, that's a really great way to describe that, because it's almost a question of, are we going to collapse under the paradox, right? Or is the root of the paradox like going to continue to support and further expand the paradox? It's almost like how contradictory can one country be? You know what I mean? How far in the future can we can we continue with these opposing factions? Yeah, for sure. And so, to take it back to being a builder a little bit, and this is like kind of like the last question or compound question.
Yeah, go.
What has been the most rewarding about building and deploying Confetti so far? And what initiatives or innovations would you like Confetti to lead to the industry, Confetti to contribute to the industry as it continues to grow?
Oh, I want people to have fun. I want people to be able to have fun, and I want them to be able to learn about things and have incentive to learn about things. So if we're doing contests where they have to think about entries, and give attention to entries, that they never thought about before, and that's incentivizing them to learn about things, and have fun, in the course of a game, I'm happy. The thing I'm happiest about is the messages we get from users all the time. People who play almost always come back and they play in more, and they send feedback that they really enjoy it, and it's really fun. It's a nerve-wracking game sometimes, and you get down to the final seconds and you're trying to figure out if you're going to win. And that's what a good game is. I would like saying that it's incentivizing people to pay attention to new topics, and they're having fun doing it. And if that's happening, then that's actually what makes me really happy.
For sure. And just in terms of shameless self-promotion, what's coming up for you guys? How can people get in touch? What can people get involved with?
Yeah, well, I'll talk about some things that we launched recently. So we just launched a new feature that shows you how much you would earn if a contest ended right now. So, for example, if you go on our weekly, we've also started running contests every week where we give away $1,000. That amount then goes up as more people vote. So they've been going up to thousands of dollars that people are earning every week on the site. And we just had a feature where you can see how much money you would earn if the contest ended right now. So it kind of gives you a barometer of, is it worth it or not? And right now, for the contest running, just this morning I posted, if you put $120 on, I think the third place entry, the projection right now, if the contest ended, is you would earn something $1,200, something like that. So it's like a 12x return, something like that.
Yeah.
And of course this can change, as the contest goes. So we added that. We also just changed the flow to create contest. So it's one page, takes about 20 seconds. There's really only 2 fields you need to fill out. And you can earn 5% of all transaction volume when you create a contest. So if you want to set one up, a poll, any sort of voting, you can set that up and you can earn from that as well. So we're really excited by that. The big thing that we're thinking about a lot is just on-ramping. This is a major challenge for the industry, which is how do you let people just, take out a credit card or debit card and add $5 so they can start playing in a product. And it's a really, really difficult problem. And so this is the big thing that we're trying to focus on right now. It's just thinking like who our providers are we're working with to really give international coverage so people around the world can play. You know, like if you're in India and there's a $20 minimum, you know, to put money in, like that's how much you make over 4 days of minimum wage in India is $20. So like that's pretty prohibitive, right? To get people to play. So like, you know, there's a lot of on-ramping issues that have not been solved in crypto. And there's a lot of different international providers that have not been aggregated, and it's just like, and the rules change all the time, products get deprecated, and this is the really big challenge. It's just like, you know, we've seen there's a lot of people around the world who want to play in this. It's just making it as easy as possible for them to do so.
That was The Exchange, available exclusively on Substack and YouTube. Visit our website, www.thefzz.io, to learn more. And be sure to check out our LinkedIn page, where you can check out more great content from across the world of finance.